Ladies, we need to talk, not about what men say they want, but about what they actually think about when they're not overthinking their next text message or pretending they don't care as much as they do. See, there's this funny thing that happens when you get past all the surface level conversations. You start hearing the real stuff. And trust me, some of that real stuff, it's not showing up in his search history, but it's definitely showing up in his imagination. Today I'm going to walk you through 7 places men fantasize about having sex, but won't tell you. Not because they're ashamed, not because they don't want you to know, but because sometimes even the most confident guy doesn't quite know how to say, "Hey babe, you know what would be hot?" without sounding like a complete lunatic. When it comes to male desire, one of the most powerful forces that fuels sexual imagination is the thrill of the forbidden. This isn't about being reckless or crossing boundaries. It's about the psychological allure of doing something that feels just slightly out of bounds. For men, fantasizing about sex in places that are unconventional or even taboo is often less about the physical location and more about the emotional high that comes from breaking the norm. The very idea of doing something that's not supposed to happen in a certain setting adds layers of excitement and urgency. There's something undeniably intoxicating about the tension between control and abandon. In everyday life, men are often expected to be composed, rational, and responsible, but in fantasy, all of that can be suspended. The forbidden represents a break from rules, from pressure, from expectations, whether it's the idea of sneaking away during a formal event or imagining an encounter in a public space where discretion is a must. These scenarios symbolize freedom. They offer a temporary escape from the scripted version of themselves that they present to the world. It's in this escape that desire comes alive. The forbidden is also inherently tied to secrecy, and secrecy has a unique power in romantic and sexual dynamics. When something feels like it has to be kept hidden, it immediately becomes more valuable and more thrilling. Think about the rush someone feels when sneaking a glance, sharing a private joke, or even brushing hands in a crowded room. That electricity, that spark, it's born from doing something subtle, something private, something that carries a quiet risk. In fantasy, that risk is amplified, and the more off-limits something feels, the more it demands attention in the mind. This doesn't mean men are always looking for danger or scandal. What it really means is that men, like all people, are wired to find excitement in contrast. The contrast between what's allowed and what's not, between public and private, between control and chaos. The forbidden fantasy gives a man permission to let go of his usual filters and act on raw impulse. And even though these fantasies might never be acted on in real life, they serve an important psychological purpose. They give space to the wilder, more primal side of masculinity, the one that often gets buried under responsibility and routine. This thrill is not about disrespect or dominance, it's about energy. It's about charging up intimacy with a jolt of unpredictability. Men fantasize about places where they're not supposed to be sexual, because it's in those spaces that their imagination is most alive. A conference room after hours, the backseat of a car during a rainstorm, a dimly lit dressing room. These aren't just locations. They're symbols. They represent tension, urgency, risk, and most importantly, desire that feels uncontainable. Spontaneity has a magnetic pull when it comes to sexual attraction, especially for men. It taps into a deeply rooted need for excitement, variety, and emotional stimulation that goes beyond physical desire. While routine offers comfort and stability in a relationship, it can sometimes dull the spark that made things exciting in the beginning. Pausing spontaneous moments reintroduce unpredictability, which reignites the chemistry and energy that often fades over time. For many men, fantasizing about sex in unexpected places is not just about location, it's about the experience breaking the script of the everyday. Men often carry the weight of performance and predictability in their lives, whether it's at work, in relationships, or within social circles. There's a rhythm to their day, a certain structure they're expected to follow. But spontaneous encounters, or even the fantasy of them, disrupt that rhythm. They feel like a glitch in the matrix, a moment where time slows down and nothing else matters. It's in these disruptions that passion can feel most alive. A sudden, impulsive kiss, a moment of eye contact that lingers just a little too long, the suggestion of something bold and unplanned. These are the sparks that ignite deeper desire. The appeal of spontaneity is also rooted in the element of surprise. When something happens unexpectedly, it demands full attention. There's no time to overthink, no room for hesitation. That urgency is intoxicating because it bypasses logic and connects directly to instinct. For men, this taps into something primal, a moment where instinct takes over, where they're fully present in their emotions and desire. Even just imagining these scenarios is enough to trigger a rush of adrenaline and anticipation. What makes spontaneous fantasies so powerful is that they feel authentic. They suggest a level of passion and mutual desire that is unplanned and therefore more real. The idea that a partner is so overcome with desire that they simply can't wait, that they need connection right there and then, is incredibly validating. It reassures a man's need to feel wanted, chosen, and irresistible. And even if that moment never plays out in reality, the fantasy fulfills that emotional craving in a powerful way. This desire for spontaneity isn't just physical, it's deeply emotional. It represents a break from monotony, a reconnection with the thrill of discovery, and a chance to feel something fresh and unexpected. It reminds a man of the early days of a relationship when every touch felt new and every kiss had the potential to lead somewhere wild. Fantasies about unexpected places, like a beach at night, an elevator between floors, or even a quiet corner at a party, are symbolic of this craving. They speak to a desire to feel alive, to break free from the ordinary, and to experience connection in its most raw and unfiltered form. Men often fantasize about sex in unexpected environments because these settings awaken a different kind of intimacy, one that isn't always available in everyday life. It's not always about the physical thrill of the place itself, but about what that environment symbolizes emotionally and psychologically. A new or unusual setting has the power to make a man feel more connected, more present, and more engaged in the moment. In a way, the unfamiliarity of the environment strips away routine and forces both partners into a space of heightened awareness and vulnerability. These settings, whether imagined or real, create a backdrop that transforms the act into something more than just physical. A forest trail, a rooftop under the stars, a quiet office late at night. These are not just locations, they are emotional triggers. They suggest secrecy, excitement, rebellion, or even deep romanticism. Each place becomes a character in the fantasy, enhancing the emotional undertones of the moment. And for many men, these environments are about more than risk. They're about tapping into a different layer of emotional connection, one that feels less scripted and more instinctive. The idea of being with someone in an unusual place forces a kind of closeness that can be missing in more routine settings. There's a shared secret, a shared thrill, and often a need to rely on each other in a new way. That co-created experience becomes emotionally intimate. Even in fantasy, the mere act of imagining these scenarios can stir feelings of deeper bonding. It feels like a private world, a moment stolen away from the demands and expectations of everyday life, where both people are entirely focused on each other. There's also an emotional vulnerability that comes with stepping outside the norm. Whether the location is semi-public, adventurous, or simply unfamiliar, it requires a degree of trust and mutual presence. That trust, even when imagined, enhances the emotional intensity of the experience. It's not just about being turned on. It's about being seen, desired, and chosen in a space where anything could happen. The man isn't just visualizing an act, he's visualizing a connection that feels powerful and unique. Furthermore, these fantasies often serve as a subconscious way for men to reclaim a sense of play and curiosity in their relationships. When sex becomes confined to the same place, same timing, same rhythm, it can begin to lose its emotional vibrancy. but when it's imagined in a new place, somewhere that feels different from daily life, it brings back a sense of novelty and wonder. That freshness isn't just exciting, it's meaningful. It represents an emotional openness, a desire to explore not just physical pleasure, but the full spectrum of romantic connection in new ways. The environment then becomes a catalyst for more than just sex. It becomes a symbol of connection, freedom, passion, and closeness unburdened by the constraints of routine. It allows the man to imagine a version of intimacy that is fuller, deeper, and more emotionally charged than what he might express openly in day-to-day conversation. Fantasy, especially for men, is rarely just about the physical details of a place. It's far more about the emotional texture, the underlying feelings that a scenario evokes. The location may serve as the setting, but the real power of the fantasy lies in the emotion it stirs. Whether it's about feeling desired, powerful, adventurous, or deeply connected, the emotional charge is what gives the fantasy its staying power. Men might picture specific settings like a shower, a balcony, or a car, but those places are only stand-ins for something far more meaningful happening internally. A rooftop at night, for instance, isn't just about being outdoors or elevated. It's about the sense of freedom, the rush of doing something bold and spontaneous. A fantasy about an office isn't always about the physical environment of desks and chairs. It may be tied to the feeling of authority, dominance, or breaking a societal norm. Every fantasy has a deeper emotional code, and the place is often just a trigger that unlocks that emotional layer. Men aren't always consciously aware of this dynamic, but it's there, shaping the appeal of the experience they imagine. Sometimes the fantasy represents validation. Being wanted in a moment that feels urgent or forbidden speaks to a deep desire to feel chosen and irresistible. The fantasy may be set in a place where such behavior is unexpected, but the emotional core is all about affirmation. It says, "You're so desirable that I couldn't wait," which is one of the most emotionally rewarding messages a person can receive. It's not about the logistics of the location. It's about the feeling of being craved so intensely that circumstances become irrelevant. Other times, the fantasy is about emotional escape. Life can feel routine, stressful, or emotionally flat, and imagining an intense, unplanned sexual experience in an unusual place becomes a way to mentally break free. It's a form of emotional rebellion, a way to feel alive, spontaneous, and emotionally charged. The location in this context serves to contrast with the ordinary. A quiet museum corner, a parked car in the rain, or even a tucked-away alley isn't about geography. It's about injecting the moment with the kind of emotion that breaks through numbness or repetition. Men also use fantasy as a way to safely explore parts of themselves they might not express openly. That includes vulnerability, power dynamics, or even softness. A place like a beach at night might evoke a sense of openness, peace, and intimacy, allowing the emotional side of the fantasy to unfold. The backdrop enhances the emotional story being told in the mind. It's not the sand or the ocean breeze. It's the closeness, the quiet, the intimacy of being alone together in a world that feels like it's paused just for them. The emotional tone behind the fantasy is what makes it memorable. It's the feeling that lingers long after the visual fades. Whether it's adrenaline, affection, dominance, submission, freedom, or deep emotional connection, the place is simply a doorway to those deeper emotional states. Secrecy and risk are two powerful forces that naturally intensify desire, especially in the male imagination. There's something incredibly electrifying about knowing that what you're doing, or even just thinking about, is not entirely allowed, not fully within the boundaries of what's considered safe or socially acceptable. It's not about recklessness or danger for the sake of it. It's about the emotional charge that comes from knowing a moment is private, hidden, and maybe even a little bit dangerous. This mix of secrecy and risk taps directly into the psychological core of sexual tension. When a man fantasizes about sex in a place that feels risky, like a public setting, a semi-public room, or somewhere just outside the lines of acceptability, it adds a layer of adrenaline that elevates the entire experience. The heart beats faster, not just because of physical desire, but because of the looming question of being caught, of someone hearing, of the potential fallout. That tension creates a mental and emotional cocktail that's hard to resist. It's a sensation of being completely in the moment, where instinct takes over and every sense is heightened. Secrecy brings its own flavor to the fantasy. It's about having a world within a world, something that no one else sees or knows about. In a world where men are often expected to be transparent, in control, and composed, the idea of having a secret becomes deeply seductive. It allows for a break from the external world, a place where rules don't apply and identity can be fluid. That secret, shared with someone else, becomes a powerful bond. It's not just about hiding from others, it's about revealing something deeply personal to just one other person, which creates an intense feeling of intimacy. The fantasy of secrecy also satisfies a desire to feel chosen. When something is done in secret, it suggests exclusivity. It means you and only you, and that message carries incredible emotional weight. It's not just about lust, it's about being special enough to be someone's hidden obsession. The risk makes it more meaningful, not less. And the location, whether imagined in a parking garage, a quiet corner of a party, or a laundry room, becomes symbolic of that secrecy and that risk. It adds to the emotional texture of the fantasy. Risk in this context also includes emotional vulnerability, putting oneself in a position where things could go wrong, where being caught could mean embarrassment, awkwardness, or even confrontation, requires stepping outside of comfort zones. That act of stepping out is thrilling in itself. It shows confidence, boldness, and a willingness to defy limits for the sake of desire. Even if the risk is only imagined, the emotional sensation is real. It allows the man to mentally explore his boundaries and see how far he'd be willing to go for a moment of passion. The blend of secrecy and risk activates not just the body but the mind. It creates a dynamic where every movement matters, where silence becomes communication, and where even the smallest gesture is loaded with meaning. Understanding a man's fantasies isn't just about uncovering sexual preferences, it's about gaining insight into what makes him feel alive, connected, and emotionally engaged. Fantasies, even the ones kept private or unspoken, are often reflections of deeper need. They can point to a desire for adventure, vulnerability, validation, or simply a break from monotony. When a woman takes the time to explore and understand those fantasies, she's not just connecting physically, she's building a stronger emotional bond that makes intimacy more meaningful and lasting. A man's fantasy is often a safe space where he allows himself to feel things he might not normally express out loud. In real life, he might feel the need to maintain control, appear strong, or keep emotions at a certain distance, but in his imagination, those rules don't apply. He can be wild, vulnerable, playful, dominant, romantic, or even shy, depending on the emotional tone of his inner world. When someone is able to enter that space without judgment, it sends a powerful message. It's safe to be fully seen. That emotional safety transforms fantasy into connection. Fantasies also reveal how a man experiences desire. They often highlight the scenarios in which he feels most wanted, most in control, or most emotionally free. For example, if he fantasizes about being surprised by his partner in an unexpected moment, it might reflect a deep need to feel chosen and irresistible. If he imagines being in a place where he has to be quiet and discreet, it may be about the intensity of presence and unspoken connection. These scenarios are rarely about location alone. They're about how he wants to feel in that moment. By understanding what these fantasies represent emotionally, a partner can meet him on a deeper level, not by performing the fantasy word for word, but by engaging the emotional need behind it. That might mean creating more moments of spontaneity, validating his desirability, or exploring intimacy in ways that feel new and unexpected. When a man feels that his partner is not only aware of what excites him, but is also curious about why it excites him, it creates a bond that's both erotic and emotional. It turns sex into communication, not just action. Men don't always have the language to express what their fantasies mean, which is why they often remain hidden or unexplored. But when they're encouraged to share in a space without shame or pressure, it can change the dynamic of a relationship completely. It moves the connection beyond the physical and into something more profound. It becomes about trust, play, mutual discovery, and emotional closeness. Fantasies aren't just windows into desire. They're opportunities to show a man that he's not alone in his wants, that he's accepted in his complexity, and that he's understood on a level deeper than he may have thought possible.